Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been working at this mid-sized accounting firm for about 3 years now. The pay is decent, the work isn't too demanding, and my co-workers are generally great. There's just one tiny problem. Our supervisor. He's this middle-aged man who thinks he's entitled to know every single detail of our personal lives, especially when it comes to taking time off. Whether it's paid time off or sick leave, he always has to know exactly why we need it. And I mean exactly. When I first started, I thought maybe he was just being thorough or showing concern for his employees. But no, he would use this information to judge whether our reasons were valid enough in his opinion. Once, my co-worker needed a day off to attend her cousin's wedding, and he actually suggested she might want to reconsider because it wasn't an immediate family member. Another time, someone requested sick leave for a migraine, and he kept pushing for more specific symptoms to determine if they were sick enough to warrant a day off. It was humiliating for everyone involved. We all complained about it amongst ourselves, but nobody wanted to confront him directly. He was still our supervisor after all, and most of us couldn't afford to risk our jobs. That is, until my co-worker, let's call her the office hero, decided she'd had enough. It happened during lunch break last Thursday. About 10 of us were in the break room, including me and the supervisor, when our hero walked in. She had this look on her face that I now recognize as pure determination. She approached the supervisor quietly and asked him if he'd received her request for Monday. He looked up from his phone with that usual nosy expression of his and asked her to remind him why she needed the day off. The break room got quieter. We all knew what was coming. Another interrogation. But what happened next was legendary. Our hero, who's usually quite soft-spoken, suddenly stood up straighter. In a voice that got progressively louder, she gave him exactly what he asked for. She announced for everyone to hear that she needed the day off because her lady parts needed an inspection and a tune-up. She didn't stop there. She sarcastically offered to provide the doctor's name and even suggested he might want to come along and take notes. The break room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The supervisor's face turned redder than the apple he was holding. He started opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Our hero turned on her heel and walked out, head held high, leaving behind a room full of shocked faces. After a few seconds of stunned silence, someone snorted, and that was it. We all lost it. People were crying from laughing so hard. Someone actually slipped off their chair. The supervisor practically ran out of the break room. For the rest of the day, he wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. The next morning, we all got an email saying that from now on, we only need to mark our time off requests as personal or medical. No further explanation required. Word spread quickly through the office, and now whenever the supervisor starts getting too nosy about anything, someone just has to mention inspections or tune-ups, and he shuts up immediately. He's been surprisingly reasonable ever since. The hero of our story, she got her Monday off, no questions asked. In fact, I don't think anyone's been questioned about their time off since then. I had just finished my dance recital and was still wearing my performance outfit, a flowy knee-length skirt that was part of our costume. My mom suggested we grab dinner to celebrate, so we headed to this nice restaurant downtown. I'm 16, and I've been dancing for almost 10 years now. This was my first solo performance, and I was still buzzing with excitement. The host seated us at a cozy booth, and everything was going great. My mom and I were discussing the performance, looking at videos she'd taken, when this middle-aged woman at the next table kept looking over at us. I noticed her whispering to her husband and giving me disapproving looks, but I tried to ignore it. About halfway through our meal, she suddenly got up and walked over to our table. I thought maybe she was heading to the restroom, but she stopped right next to me. She immediately started lecturing me about how my skirt was completely inappropriate for a family restaurant. When I tried to explain that it was my dance costume, she just scoffed and told me she didn't care what it was, saying young ladies shouldn't be displaying themselves like this. My mom immediately stepped in telling the woman that I was dressed perfectly appropriately and asking her to leave us alone. The woman then started bragging about working for the government and claimed she knew what was appropriate, saying she wouldn't have her family's dinner ruined by this kind of display. Before anyone could react, she reached over and yanked down my skirt. Thank God I was sitting down and wearing dance shorts underneath. I screamed and several people turned to look. My mom shouted at the woman, demanding to know what was wrong with her and telling her not to touch her daughter. The woman's husband rushed over looking mortified. He yelled at his wife, asking what she was doing and telling her to stop immediately. By this point, other diners had their phones out recording. The restaurant manager came running over and told the woman she needed to leave immediately. The woman tried to defend herself, saying she was just trying to protect the moral values of the establishment. But the manager cut her off and told her that he was calling the police because what she did was assault. The woman's face went pale when she realized people were recording. She tried to grab one person's phone, but they stepped back, warning her not to try it and telling her everything was already on video. The police arrived within minutes. The woman tried to play it off like she was some moral authority, mentioning repeatedly that she worked for the state government. That didn't help her case at all. They took statements from everyone, and she was arrested right there in the restaurant. The video went viral online. Within days, it had millions of views. People recognized her as a government employee, and soon her workplace found out. She lost her job, and I later found out she was charged with sexual battery. My mom and I pressed charges. Her lawyer tried to get her a plea deal, but the judge wasn't very sympathetic. The final ruling required her to do community service, attend mandatory counseling, and register as a sex offender. She also had to pay a hefty fine and was banned from the restaurant for life. The restaurant comped our meal that night and gave us a gift card for future visits. The manager personally apologized, though it wasn't their fault at all. What surprised me most was the outpouring of support from people online. Other dancers shared similar stories of being harassed about their performance outfits, and many parents reached out to show solidarity. A few weeks after the incident, my dance studio organized a special event to raise awareness about harassment of performers. Several local news stations covered it, and we even had some city council members attend to show their support. My dance instructor shared her own experiences of dealing with similar situations throughout her career, and we worked together to create guidelines for other young dancers on how to handle harassment. The woman tried to appeal her sentence, claiming she was just trying to uphold moral standards, but the appeals court upheld the original ruling. Her husband eventually filed for divorce, unable to cope with the embarrassment and her refusal to acknowledge her wrongdoing. I heard she had to move to a different state because she couldn't find work anywhere in town. Turns out, assaulting a minor in a restaurant isn't great for your career prospects. My mom ended up starting a support group for parents of young performers, helping them deal with similar situations and providing resources for legal protection. We've connected with dance studios across the country, sharing our story and helping implement safety measures for young dancers. Every time I think about it, I still can't believe someone would think it's okay to put their hands on a stranger, let alone a minor. My mom says the woman got what she deserved, losing her job and facing legal consequences. I just hope she learned her lesson and never tries something like that again. I've been working as an employment counselor for the past 7 years, helping people find jobs and build their careers. It's rewarding work, though it can be challenging at times. After the economic downturn last year, our government-funded employment center has been busier than ever. We've had to implement strict scheduling policies to accommodate everyone fairly. I actually started this career after experiencing unemployment myself. Back then, I struggled for months to find work after my tech company downsized. The employment counselor who helped me was so impactful that I decided to switch careers and do the same for others. I went back to school, got certified, and now I help about 15 clients per day with everything from resume writing to interview preparation. Today, though, I encountered one of those clients that makes you question humanity's sense of entitlement. The morning started normally. I was reviewing my afternoon appointments when I noticed one client hadn't shown up for their 2:30 p.m. slot. This happens sometimes. People get nervous about job searching or simply forget. Usually I send a polite email reminding them about our cancellation policy and offer to reschedule. Around 4:45 p.m., just as I was preparing to wrap up for the day, my office phone rang. I answered with our standard greeting, and the caller identified himself as my missed appointment from earlier, saying he needed to reschedule. I recognized the voice as my 2:30 no-show. I pulled up my calendar to check availability. I explained that unfortunately next week was completely booked, and the earliest afternoon slot available was in 2 weeks on the 20th. The client immediately protested, insisting that 2 weeks was too long to wait and that he needed to see me sooner. I offered him the 8 a.m. slots available next week, acknowledging that I knew he preferred afternoons based on his previous booking, but suggesting it as an alternative option. He quickly dismissed the early morning slot as being too early, but continued to stress how urgently he needed to see me. When he asked about tomorrow's availability, I told him about the 8 a.m. opening, explaining that otherwise the day was fully booked. That's when things took an entitled turn. The client actually suggested that I should move someone else from their afternoon slot next week to 8 a.m. instead, so he could take their afternoon slot. I couldn't help but laugh slightly, thinking he was joking. When I was met with a long, serious pause on the other end of the line, my smile faded as I realized he was actually serious. I gave him a firm no. He seemed shocked by my refusal, asking me what I meant by no. I had to explain that I couldn't move another client's appointment to accommodate him, as it wouldn't be fair to them. The client grew increasingly frustrated, arguing that this was really important because he needed the job coaching for an interview next week. I restated his options: an 8 a.m. appointment tomorrow, an 8 a.m. next week, or an afternoon slot in 2 weeks. His frustration turned to anger as he accused me of not helping people find jobs, demanding to know how he was supposed to get a job without my help. I maintained my professional demeanor, explaining that I was trying to help by offering several alternatives and pointing out that his missed appointment without notice meant other clients who needed help couldn't use that time slot. I emphasized the importance of being fair to everyone. At this point, he resorted to the classic threat of speaking to my supervisor. I told him that he was welcome to do so, but explained that they would tell him the same thing, as our scheduling policy was very clear about not moving other clients' appointments to accommodate missed appointments. After another long pause, he finally resigned himself to the 2-week wait. As I scheduled him for the 2-week slot, I was tempted to ask how he'd feel if I moved his appointment to 8 a.m. to accommodate someone else who missed their slot. But I kept it professional. I confirmed his new appointment for the 20th at 2:30 p.m., telling him I would send a confirmation email and reminding him about our 24-hour cancellation notice requirement. He responded with a dismissive whatever before hanging up. After he hung up, I sat there shaking my head at the audacity. I've had clients miss appointments before, but this was the first time someone suggested I should inconvenience other clients to make up for their mistake. The next day, I wasn't entirely surprised to receive an email from my supervisor. Apparently, the client had indeed complained, claiming I was unhelpful and refused to accommodate his schedule. My supervisor, who had already reviewed the call recording, all our calls are recorded for quality purposes, responded by reminding him of our cancellation policy and suggesting that if our scheduling requirements were too strict for him, he was welcome to seek assistance from private career counseling services instead. I never did see that client again. 2 days before his rescheduled appointment, we received an email canceling his appointment and informing us he had found a more accommodating service. I sincerely hoped his new counselor had a very sturdy backbone. They were going to need it. I've been working at this tech company for about 3 years now. Sure, I'm friendly, but I prefer maintaining boundaries. That changed a bit when our department got reorganized last month, and I ended up sharing an office with this guy from accounting. He seemed nice enough at first. We'd chat about work stuff, share lunch breaks sometimes, and everything was going fine until yesterday's incident. See, we had this massive snowstorm hit our city, the kind that makes you question why you live in a place where the air hurts your face. When we were wrapping up work, he approached my desk and asked if I could give him a ride home, explaining that Uber prices were insane due to the storm. I agreed and asked where he lived, to which he replied he lived about 15 miles north near the mall. I didn't think twice about helping him out. The weather was terrible, and I knew ride-sharing apps jack up their prices during storms. We got to my car, brushed off the snow, and started our journey. The roads were slick, and I was driving carefully when I heard the window rolling down. I asked him what he was doing, and he casually mentioned he was going to toss his coffee cup out the window. I immediately told him that was absolutely not happening. I quickly enabled the child lock. He looked at me like I had just insulted his entire family, telling me to relax and claiming everyone does it and it's no big deal. I warned him that if he littered from my car, he would be getting out. He rolled his eyes and slouched in his seat. I thought that was the end of it. But when we stopped at a red light, this genius actually opened the door and tossed his cup onto the street. I expressed my disbelief and immediately pulled into a nearby parking lot. I told him to go pick up his trash or find another way home. He complained that I was being overly dramatic and mentioned how freezing it was outside. I reminded him that he should have thought about that before littering and gave him the choice to either pick up his trash or get out of my car entirely. He protested, pointing out that it was 20 degrees out and he wasn't dressed for the weather. I remained firm, reiterating his options: pick up the trash or get out. He stubbornly refused to move and demanded that I just drive. That's when I pulled out my phone and told him that I would be calling 911 and reporting him to Human Resources the next day. He still thought I was bluffing. When the operator answered and I started explaining the situation, he finally realized I was serious. He suddenly changed his tune and said he would pick up the cup, but I told him it was too late. He pleaded with me not to leave him there, saying he would freeze, but I reminded him that he should have thought about that before littering from my car and refusing to clean up after himself. He finally got out, cursing under his breath. When I drove away, my phone started blowing up with calls and messages from him, but I just blocked his number. The next morning, I went straight to Human Resources and reported the incident. It turns out they take environmental violations pretty seriously at our company. It's part of their new green initiative they've been pushing. They pulled the security footage from the street camera at the intersection, and guess what? This wasn't the first time he'd been caught littering on company property. He got written up and had to attend a mandatory environmental responsibility seminar. Plus, he had to do community service with the company's weekend cleanup crew for a month. The cleaning route includes the very street where he tossed his cup. Oh, and I found out later that the Uber ride home cost him $95. Expensive lesson in environmental responsibility, if you ask me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.